Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio. And today on Patriot Radio, is the United States about ready to attack Iran? Also, a major breakthrough regarding peace between Ukraine and Russia, and a Marxist network exposed. You're going to want to watch this. We've actually been talking about it for years, but now some significant developments that you want to know about for your community. Here at Patriot Radio, we want to bring you the news before everybody else so that you can be prepared for the times ahead and the times that are already upon us, but no fear. We were made for this. So follow us on Telegram at patriotradio.us/Telegram for the latest breaking news and real-time intelligence aggregated across hundreds of different sites and really way ahead of everybody else. Also during this time, there has been a lot of fear in people, and that needs to go. And the way that fear can go is through prayer and accepting God's love. And you can text us and send us a message, patriotradio.us/prayer, or click on the QR code right there. And that brings us now to your wisdom from the Word for today. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 7. The light is pleasant, and it is good for the eyes to see the sun. Indeed, if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. The light, and actually some translations of the sun, means it is good for the eyes to see a new day dawning. And that is what we are seeing here in the United States of America right now. A new day is dawning. And yes, it's a little bit turbulent right now, but it kind of needs to be, because there's some things that need to be cleaned out that have been festering for years. And we really, as Americans, need to embrace the time if it's difficult, and we have to tell our family members about it. And you know, we have to be the tip of the spear for information and have the difficult conversations. We should be okay with that, because that's what it's going to take to change this country. And God has put you and me here in this time for exactly this moment. That, in fact, is a very encouraging thought. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing. Coming to us from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Technocracy and algocracy. What? Okay, here's what we're talking about right now. And specifically, AI is going to drop a hammer on society. And we're going to find this out. I hope not too late, that some of the things that are being removed right now are going to be replaced by AI. And the whole point behind it is to actually know you better than you know yourself, and then introduce stimulus so that it gets you to behave a certain way. So what we're seeing with technocracy and the rise of technocracy is control. They think they can use AI to control. And that is the caution with everything that is being talked about with AI. Not that it couldn't be used to help spread the gospel more. How will it be used to try to control? And Pat Wood, once again, leading the charge on that. Also, one of the weirdest articles but also weirdest statements from President Trump. Alex Jones actually caught on to this as well. Apparently, he received an invitation to join the British Commonwealth. And while they were kind of joking, I love King Charles sounds good to me. On the 250th anniversary of our independence, yeah, it might seem like a joke, but let's not joke about our independence from Great Britain, and let's never go back to that globalist idea and yoking. And that brings us now to the China front. South Korea is struggling to contain deadly wildfires. Video footage showing apocalyptic scenes. Very interesting that suddenly wildfires in South Korea. I wonder if there's agents in the United States and maybe even South Korea that could be actually helping to light wildfires. I wonder if that's being investigated. You know, a bunch of people said it was conspiracy, but then you find out that a whole bunch of people actually were seen or recorded in the vicinity of wildfires acting in a suspicious manner. Well, why are we investigating this more? Because this was in Al-Qaeda's training manual to actually start wildfires to disrupt the United States. Also, senior general disappears in latest high-level political purge. One of the Chinese military's two most senior leaders disappeared from public view and is believed by U.S. intelligence agencies to be the latest victim of the ongoing political purge in the upper ranks of the People's Liberation Army. Vice chairman of Communist Party Central Committee, Military Commission, was ousted. Now, here's why I'm bringing this up. I believe China is doing this political purge right now of people that they cannot trust right before they're going to invade Taiwan. The fact that this is continuing over the last 3 years means to me that they don't trust some of their leaders to actually get the thing done. But it's an intelligence indicator that, in fact, they will attempt to invade Taiwan in the near term. I'm talking like in the next 2 years. Again, fall time frame, spring time frame, March, April, September, October. It's the best tidal situation for an invasion to happen. But this is probably why there's some things going on. You know, we had this ship that can be used similar to Mulberry Docks in World War II, where they can dock with each other to bring Chinese tanks on shore, just seen a couple of weeks ago. And so today, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth outlined the vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, one where countries can determine their own futures, and then said that no one should question the United States' resolve to defend its interests in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Now, aside from all the exercises, aside from the pre-positioning of supplies, aside from the fact that the United States is refurbishing air bases that were used in World War II in many of the island chains out there in the Pacific, the speed, the quickening that is happening in this era tells me that this is really, this is coming fast, probably faster than we can understand. So we're going to keep our eyes on that and keep you abreast of any significant changes. Now, one of the things that we look for is aircraft carriers going to an area of the world where you have 2 or 3 U.S. aircraft carrier groups in one area. That usually means war. Now, we're going to get to that in the Middle East front here in a second. We also look for the forward positioning of invasion forces and these ships that China might be using, and the pre-positioning of air defense and hospital units is some of the things that we look for as indicators. Now, those indicators are not out there right now, so it's not going to happen in the next 72 hours. But what may happen in the next 72 hours is a blockade of Taiwan. That could happen at any time. And China's armed forces are more than ready to surround the island and attempt to blockade Taiwan. Now, there would have to be a conflict if there was an air resupply, similar to what happened with West Berlin and the United States and the Great Airlift with JFK. So this Berlin airlift might be a similar tactic, but then China may try to confront the United States. So the gray zone tactics continue with China. And the Taiwanese Coast Guard seized a suspected Chinese vessel in restricted waters off of northwest Taiwan. No name, no home port, no certification. Detained the boat, suspecting it of illegally supplying fuel to fishing boats trespassing in Taiwanese waters. Those same fishing boats very clearly are operating as a spy network for Communist China. Also, Taiwan officially responded to China's deep-sea cable-cutting device. Now, Chinese came out, again, they came out and were very public with this. They wouldn't do this unless they were in near-term planning. Came out and admitted they had a new cable-cutting device to sever underwater cables. Taiwan responded and said that that was not acceptable for any of the countries in the Indo-Pac. China unveiled this tool with global consequences, and 95% of data flows undersea, and the world must act to defend this vital infrastructure. Yes, it must. And the Russians have known this and have been doing it for a while, and so is the United States and allied countries. The fact is, this is one more indicator of near-term planning for an invasion and blockade of Taiwan. And that moves us now to the Middle East front. The Israeli Defense Force is reportedly calling for deploying multiple combat divisions to re-enter Gaza, crush Hamas, seize control of large areas of the Strip, and push the enclave's 2.2 million residents into a narrow coastal corridor, with Israeli forces remaining in Gaza indefinitely and taking administration of the territory. It appears that staging is occurring right now, which may explain the next article, where Palestinians have taken to the streets in what appears to be the largest anti-Hamas protests in Gaza since the October 7th attacks. Families and clans in southern Gaza have called on Palestinians to join renewed protests against Hamas and the war set again for noon tomorrow. So not only today, but tomorrow as well. So this is kind of the first signs that there may be a fracture of support there in the Palestinian territories, because they see that Israel is about to drop the hammer. Also, the President of the United States will hold hostage takers accountable for their actions. The United States sanctioned 3 Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and Security officials for their role in Robert Levinson's abduction and disappearance today. And on the heels of that, top Iranian officials have reportedly authorized Iranian Foreign Affairs Minister Abbas, we're going to call him Abbas for today, to advance any diplomatic initiative in relation to the United States. And that is because of what happened with the pre-positioning of specific forces by the U.S. to Diego Garcia. 7 B-2A Spirit stealth bombers were deployed to Diego Garcia and are in range of Iran and Yemen. It looks like it might be for both. So clearly, Iranians are getting a message right now and may try to begin negotiations, but also don't count Israel out in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities as well. In addition to that, Jabir Ammar, one of the founding members of Hamas, said, quote, "We do not fight Jews because they are Jews or even because they are murderous and criminal Zionists. Our prophet commanded us to eliminate them, and God ordered us to wipe out every single Jew," end quote. Today, according to Palestinian media, he was eliminated by the Israelis. Again, these are their own words. Their own words, and liberals here in the United States try to cover for them all the time. Mike Huckabee, quote, "Right now Israel needs an ally, and the Jewish people need to know that they have friends. And I am proud to have the right as a Christian to say to the Jews, you are not alone. We will not walk behind you, but alongside you," end quote. Interesting to see how fast he is put in to a key position with Israel as ambassador in the next few weeks and what happens in the Middle East. After the break, more from the Russia front and a Marxist network here in the United States, finally exposed for what it is.
Attention business owners and entrepreneurs. Patriot TV is launching a brand new TV series showcasing American-made products, and your business could be featured. Whether you sell your products online on Etsy or Shopify and dream of reaching millions of viewers on smart TVs like Samsung, Sony, TCL, and LG, or apps like Roku, Android, and Apple TV, this is your chance. We're searching for U.S.-based businesses offering all types of products and services proudly made in the USA. If you've ever wanted to showcase your products on TV like QVC or the Home Shopping Network, now's your opportunity. Support our American economy, grow your business, and be seen by loyal Patriot viewers across the country. Know someone with a business or have a business yourself? Don't miss out. Contact us at supportingpatriots.com today. Be a guest on this new exciting TV series. Let's put your American-made products in the spotlight.
The new Supporting Patriots show on Patriot TV spotlights great Patriot-owned companies and introduces them to Patriot consumers, encouraging them to buy American-made. If you're an America-loving patriot that owns and operates his or her own business, and you have Made in America products or services, you're the perfect candidate to be interviewed on the Supporting Patriots show. If you'd like to be considered for an interview, email us at supportingpatriots@patriot.tv.
And now the Russia front. Today, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the country would sign the U.S. Black Sea ceasefire deal if Washington were to order Kiev to respect it. We will need clear guarantees. The deal would forbid either country from attacking grain, fertilizer, and other exports. The draft agreement has not been released in full, but Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Tuesday said that an agreement to halt military strikes in the Black Sea and energy infrastructure brokered by Washington was a step in the right direction. So it looks like there could be a peace deal, maybe even by the end of the week, in part. The European Union wants its citizens to prepare for crisis or war. Again, ominous sounding preparation statements coming out of Europe. And Russia issuing a statement saying that the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant belonged to Russia and can't be transferred to Ukraine or any other country because Trump said that he would like the U.S. to own it and run it. It's located near the front lines. That said, it looks like there is going to be some interesting positioning regarding energy infrastructure in Ukraine, giving the U.S. a stake in the energy future of Europe. Also, Europeans seem almost hell-bent on war with Russia. We'll see how this continues. And yes, I believe in peace through strength. And yes, I believe in nations guarding their borders. But it seems like some of the rhetoric is globalist rhetoric to bring us to World War III. We don't want that because that is the globalist plan. Also, J.D. Vance announced that he is traveling to Greenland this week. This after several high-ranking U.S. officials have landed in Greenland, causing some consternation among leadership in Greenland, and that they are, quote, going to give Greenland an offer it can't refuse, end quote. Fact of the matter is that going right past Greenland is a key Arctic corridor, which is in the national security interest of the United States to secure. So one way or another, there is going to be U.S. presence there. The Ukrainian army has retaken a couple of large areas in a continued push on the flanks of the city of Toretsk itself, threatening Russian troops hold up there with encirclement. So the positioning on the ground at least continues. That brings us now to the National Front. Hundreds of troops will start conducting surveillance across the southern border. I'm going to say that again. Hundreds of U.S. troops will start conducting surveillance across the U.S. border into Mexico, putting them for the first time on the front lines of this immigration crackdown, according to Politico. But this is something that we actually talked about 5 years ago with General Paul Vallely the idea of creating a buffer zone in Mexico. It looks like the United States may be doing that. By the way, this isn't the first time the U.S. has done it. Well, about every 50 to 60 years or so, the United States seems to have to deal with incursions by Mexico. Sometimes it's longer. So this isn't, at least historically, an anomaly. And now to exposing a network. Flying under the radar, the political arm of the Marxists in America is known as Indivisible. Now, you've heard of the Democrats, Socialists of America, but few people know about their kind of ground game, Indivisible. Now, Mike Shelby correctly posted today, Indivisible, the left-wing group behind the Musk or Us campaign, has scrubbed this image off of their website. Why? Because it looks like they're advocating for the firebombing of Tesla dealerships. Wonder if that's going to be investigated. Seems like a pretty clear link. In addition to that, here is a map of indivisible organizations across the United States. And yes, in the Northwest anyway, there has been a tenfold increase in the last year and a half. And you can see that they want to have chapters, even if it's 2 or 3 members, in every city in the United States. So what's interesting here in Spokane years ago, we broke a scandal where a local Republican went to one of the Indivisible meetings, and it was in their minutes, captured in their minutes, and released by a whistleblower, showing that Rhino Republicans had teamed up with Indivisible to get rid of Christian conservatives. In other words, to get rid of MAGA. That's what their intent was. So this is exposing this vast network. Most of you have heard of Indivisible kind of in passing. But you don't understand that this is a backbone structure for the Marxist movement in the United States. And you need to check that Indivisible map to see who's in your area. Check it out, educate your local organizations that are fighting against the Marxists, and understand that they are doing targeting using certain websites, which is also being exposed today. Mike Shelby showed that leftists are using Public Square to identify local conservative businesses to boycott for these target lists. And specifically, targeting for boycotts can then easily, and this is just simple intelligence analysis, can easily be turned into a target list for other things later when political and social conditions deteriorate. So, Public Square being used by the left, I think that's a significant bit of intelligence that everybody out there should know. Also today, on the good news front, President Trump signed a presidential memorandum requiring the immediate declassification of all FBI files related to the Crossfire hurricane investigation. And as General Flynn said, this is going to be fun. More on that later. Also, President Trump called on Congress to codify the Doge cuts and his executive orders. Yes, let's make that stuff permanent, not easily overturned. Congress needs to take back control of some of the powers that were delegated and obviously abused and corrupted in the bureaucracy. Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas announces an investigation into Islamic megacity development in Plano, Texas. So, yes, finally, we're actually looking at what's happening, listening to the words of the jihadis and the Marxists, and saying, hey, we need to look into this stuff here in the United States and see if it is in fact true that significant terror networks have infiltrated this country. Also, along this line, President Trump is looking at an executive order to end sanctuary cities. Crime rates have gone through the roof from the last administration, and so ending sanctuary cities in the United States via executive order would be a step in the right direction. This is probably the first step in holding local officials accountable for bucking the federal government, or worse, aiding and abetting criminals. And coming to us from the Epoch Times, 840 illegal immigrants were charged with crimes in a single week of Operation Take Back America. The sweeping enforcement push targeted illegal immigration, cartels, trafficking, and gang-related crime. This is exactly what Americans voted for. Also, ICE announced mass arrests in sanctuary metro area after mayor doubled down in helping illegals. What metro area was that? Well, it was in Massachusetts, in the sanctuary city of Boston, and netted 370 arrests of illegal aliens. Speaker Johnson issued a warning, and it's about time. Quote, Congress has the authority to defund and disband federal courts. That only takes 51 votes in the Senate. Much more achievable than 67 for trying to do impeachment. This is exactly the road we need to head down. The out-of-control courts in the United States need to be curbed. Now, most people don't understand that the judiciary was supposed to be the weakest branch of the federal government. In fact, the original idea behind the judiciary was that its opinions only applied to the parties of that case and couldn't be applied to anybody else, which is what they've done now. And I hear some people quoting Marbury versus Madison, and they're like, haven't you taken the first day of law school? What are you talking about? Why would there be a requirement in the Constitution for an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States if it wasn't incumbent on every official in the government, Congress, the executive, and the judiciary, for that matter, to determine what is and what is not constitutional? The fact of the matter is, in our system of checks and balances, the United States Supreme Court is not the final arbiter and sole arbiter of what is or what is not constitutional. And this has been a thread and a tension throughout American history, and it should be a tension. Otherwise, it would be judicial tyranny. And no one, at least in the founding generation, thought that black-robe philosopher kings should run the United States. In fact, the government should be we, the people. And lastly today, the Trump White House has outlined through an executive order 6 provisions regarding election integrity, requiring documentary government-issued proof of U.S. citizenship on voter registration forms, conditions regarding federal election-related funds on states complying with integrity measures set forth by federal law, directing the updating of the voluntary voter system guidelines and security standards for voting equipment. Well, that's fantastic. Directing the Attorney General to enter into information sharing agreements with state election officials to identify cases of election fraud and other election law violations, taking appropriate action against states that count ballots received after election days in federal election. Well, that's an interesting step forward as well. And then lastly, revoking Biden Executive Order 14019, which turned federal agencies into Democratic voter turnout centers. So the Trump administration taking some very good steps forward for election integrity. And when we come back from the break, our guest today, Alex Newman.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
And we're back with our guest today, Alex Newman. He is the founder of Liberty Sentinel. He's also the senior editor for the New American Magazine and one of the best investigative reporters of our time. Alex, it's great to have you back on Patriot Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Thank you very much for having me, Matt.
So a lot happening out there in the world today, but I wanted to talk a little bit about USAID, and it's gone under the radar about how that money actually ended up being used to persecute Christians worldwide.
Yeah, it has. And when I started looking into USAID many years ago, it was obvious to me that this was a front for the Central Intelligence Agency. They were funding militant groups, opposition groups, and over again, we would see them working with jihadist groups that were openly hostile to Christianity. And so knowing that, I reached out to a good friend in Africa. He has a mission of evangelizing Africa. His name is Dr. Peter Hammond. He, of course, has been working on the front lines of conflicts all across Africa for his entire life. He was born in South Africa, moved to Rhodesia, grew up there. And what he recounted was a constant trail of betrayal of Christians, of anti-communists, of freedom fighters, and a constant pattern of the U.S. government siding with mass murderers, butchers, communists, Islamists. And the most recent examples, of course, we have what's happening in Syria. We also have what's happening in the Congo. And multiple times, just in these two conflicts, we have seen U.S. aid funneling money to organizations that have been involved in the persecution of Christians. So between the United Nations and USAID and the State Department, we have a very long-term pattern, Matt, of the U.S. government deliberately, purposely, and consciously funding anti-Christian activities, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise when you consider what the Congress does here with our money. They persecute Christians, they murder babies. It's terrible, but it's true.
Well, let's take Syria because it's probably the easiest example. One of the oldest population of Christians still in existence in the Middle East is in Syria. And you had the United States on one hand through the Pentagon funding one side of the conflict, on the other hand through the Central Intelligence Agency funding one side of the conflict. And in the middle are ISIS and Al-Qaeda connected jihadis saying, yeah, we'll take the money, and then going ahead and slaughtering Christians en masse.
Yeah, and we have the smoking gun documents proving that, Matt. That's the thing. When Donald Trump said during his last election campaign that Hillary Clinton and Obama were the founders of ISIS, the media freaked out and laughed and said he was being a conspiracy theorist. We have smoking gun documents. In 2012, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, under the leadership of the very capable General Michael Flynn, produced an incredible memo that was read by the Secretary of State, who was Hillary Clinton at the time, and went all the way up to the president, Barack Hussein Obama. And in very clear English, right? There wasn't any kind of having to read between the lines. They just came out and said it. They said the West, in other words, the U.S. government, the French, the British, the Gulf Arab states, mostly Sunni Islamic tyrannies, and then Turkey, it said we're funding the Syrian opposition. And then right under that, it says, by the way, the Syrian opposition is led by the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Okay, so here we have direct evidence that they were funding a movement that they knew was led by Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Islamic extremists dedicated to the destruction of Christianity and the creation of a one-world global Islamic caliphate. And then you go down a little bit further, and they say the powers supporting the opposition have a goal of creating what the document describes as a Salafist principality. Well, Salafism is this kind of radical Wahhabi jihad Sunni extremism that is now the dominant religion among the regime in Syria. And they said they wanted a Salafist principality in eastern Syria. Well, they got it. We called it the Islamic State. So we have direct evidence implicating the U.S. government in the funding, not just of terrorist organizations, but one of the most murderous terrorist organizations to have existed so far this century. We have smoking gun proof that the U.S. government deliberately, knowingly funded it and created it. And frankly, I've looked at the federal statutes. There is no exemption in our federal laws about material support to terrorism that exempts officers of the CIA, agents of the CIA, or anybody else within the U.S. government.
Well, that brings us to the Arab Spring, too, because under President Obama, presidential study directive, it's been rumored, it hasn't been declassified, something Trump should do. That presidential study directive is rumored to have been the policy statement to support the Muslim Brotherhood in the start of the Arab Spring back in the day, which led again to the death of thousands of Christians.
Yeah, and this is even more troubling than just the regional implications, Matt. When you look at the Muslim Brotherhood, this is a global organization that uses jihad as a means to an end. The end is the creation of a one-world Islamic tyranny. And so you have to ask yourself, why do we see here communists and Islamists working together? And I think the only way that you can make sense of it is by understanding that they have a common enemy, the common enemy being the West, what used to be known as Christendom, and of course Christianity. And what's really interesting, too, about the Muslim Brotherhood is that there's a very strong fascist influence, right? They were very much inspired by Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist movement. And then when fascism fell, they kept the anti-Semitism, but then just moved on to more communist-inspired revolutionary thought. So here you have a deadly Islamist organization connected to all kinds of terrorist groups, by the way, Hamas, you name it, working very deliberately and very strategically to undermine the Western world, to undermine Christianity, and of course, as you pointed out, ruthlessly to purify the Middle East and get rid of infidels, which very much, of course, includes Christians.
Well, I hope President Trump does declassify PSD 11 and we just put this to bed, but really for the sake of future generations that we don't want to go back there. So that brings up this question. We've got this valley of Christians in southwest Syria. Druze are there as well. So what is the U.S. obligation to protect Christians that would be targeted by the Jolani regime there in Syria? I mean, should we step in? Because then again, is this foreign intervention? How do we handle these things, and what should be the U.S. policy on this?
Well, I think because of the U.S. government's long track record, they cannot be trusted to do anything. Even if Trump means well, and I suspect he probably does, the bureaucracy is still made up of the same fanatics. Even a lot of the cabinet-level appointments are very troubling to me. And so I think a better strategy from the American perspective is have the government finally get out, right? Everywhere they go, they make a mess. Everywhere they go, they end up empowering mass murderers and dictators and jihadists and communists. A better strategy would be for American Christian organizations to come in and help these people on the ground, very much including military training and security assistance. There's a very good example in Nigeria. There's a wonderful group of Christians that is active in Nigeria right now, training and equipping the Christian communities there to protect themselves against these jihadists who are coming into their churches, beheading people, kidnapping little girls and sending them into sex slavery. So I think this is a job really for the church to step in and say, we're not going to allow you to just slaughter our brothers and sisters without any kind of response from the global Christian community.
And there's plenty of these organizations out there, Free Burma Rangers, that do fantastic work of breaking up, sex trafficking organizations, and particularly child trafficking. There is no reason we shouldn't be leading with our businesses and our missionaries instead of the barrel of a gun in the U.S. government. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
The U.S. Constitution and our founding fathers were all pretty clear, right? The policy of the U.S. government as it relates to the rest of the world for several generations now is wildly unconstitutional. Our founding fathers very wisely warned us not to get entangled as a government in the affairs of foreign nations, in the wars of foreign nations, certainly not the civil wars of foreign nations. We want to be friends. We want to have commerce. We want to have peace and diplomatic relations with everybody, but we don't need to get involved in their conflicts. But that was one of the things that made America so incredible in the history of the world. The government mostly kept its hands out, and the church and individual Christians went around the world and took the gospel to literally every corner of this planet. So we need to go back to that kind of system. We need to listen to the advice of our founders. It was very effective in the past. Ever since the government started getting involved in all this stuff, it's been a total disaster for Christianity, for liberty, and for truth and for righteousness.
Which is a good segue of U.S. government intervention in things like gain-of-function research all over the world and biolabs. I remember when that biolab story first came out, they admitted that, yes, there was U.S. intervention, but it was actually to do good. It was to prevent diseases, etc. How did you get involved in that, number one? And number two, what has your research revealed?
Yeah, the U.S. government has been doing this for a very long time. In fact, I suspect a lot of these outbreaks that we've seen are directly traceable to the U.S. government, Dr. Fauci, and the rest of this gaggle of criminals. And I'm reminded of what the great French lawmaker and philosopher said 200 years ago, Frédéric Bastiat, author of The Law. He pointed out that there was a trend among totalitarians to create the poison and the antidote in the same laboratory. Those are his words, right? And then you look at the modern example where they're literally, the U.S. government is literally funding gain-of-function research in a military-connected laboratory in Wuhan, China, that's deliberately weaponizing deadly viruses. They're literally creating the poison and the antidote in the same laboratory. So they have a plan not just to reduce the population, not just to try to sterilize large numbers of people, but also to exploit these crises, whether it be a weaponized virus, whether it be a civil war, whether it be any of these issues, to limit freedom, to advance the cause of globalism, and ultimately to bring all of humanity under a one-world totalitarian system. So we've got to get the government out of all of these things, out of the gain-of-function research, out of the meddling in foreign countries, and frankly, out of the vast majority of what they're doing today, from education to the economy, to the environment, you name it. That is not a responsibility for the U.S. government. And everywhere you look, these aren't just accidents, right? It would be one thing if these people were just morons and they just continually messed up. That would at least be a little bit more comforting. But what we're dealing with here is a deliberate policy of hurting people, of trying to undermine liberty, and there has to be accountability, Matt.
And with General Xi's secret speech 20 years ago, they very specifically said the policy was going to be by genetic signature to create weapons, bioweapons, to target specific ethnic populations around the world. That's what they said. And the Chinese specifically went even further and said the U.S. had to be depopulated by 200 million people so that they could occupy the existing infrastructure in the United States. And the only way they could really see to do that was through these bioweapons. And here, I mean, this is a matter of record that this speech is there, got smuggled out of China. And here are Harvard, Yale, Princeton graduates, right, are just ignorant. That can't be. It's not plausible. It can't be true. So how do we rein them in? How do we hold them accountable? Because that's really where it comes to. You know, as General Flynn pointed out last week, we've got to start holding people accountable. Otherwise, this isn't really serious.
That is exactly right. Accountability is absolutely essential. And, you know, the Bible tells us why God instituted civil government. The purpose of civil government is to punish evil. This stuff is the very essence of evil, right? God defined evil as murder, as lying, as theft, as slavery, kidnapping. I mean, that's what we're dealing with here. So the government has an obligation here to not just stop this stuff, but to punish the evildoers who perpetrated these crimes. And that's going to have to include very high-level people from the last administration and from many administrations going back in time as far back as we can reach. And by the way, I don't mean that in a partisan sense at all. I would be looking at some of the key figures in the Bush administration. The Cheneys come to mind. I would be looking back into the Clinton administration. There are people in both parties that have been deliberately betraying their country, that have been deliberately arming, aiding, and abetting the enemies of the United States of America, some of whom we're ostensibly at war with, even though Congress hasn't actually declared war. And so I think it's time to dust off a lot of those statutes and start going after these guys. I'm encouraged that there's some state-level action on this. We've seen, I think, 17 state attorneys general looking into criminal charges at Anthony Fauci. We've now seen Donald Trump argue very publicly that these so-called pardons by Joe Biden, or at least by Joe Biden's auto pen that he may or may not have known about, are not valid. And so I think now it's time for the DOJ and the FBI and U.S. attorneys' offices across the country to start looking at these people who have not just violated their oath of office, but deliberately betrayed their country.
Orwell could never have imagined this. When we come back from the break, Alex Newman, we're going to be talking about how the states can push back and a little bit, too, about Greenland. Could it become a 51st state?
American business owners, you understand the power of TV. If you have a product that you want to sell to millions of like-minded Americans who value quality, hard work, and supporting the red, white, and blue, supporting Patriots is the perfect place. If you're ready to bring your product to a patriotic audience eager to buy American, then contact us today at supportingpatriots.com and secure your spot on Supporting Patriots. Let's build a stronger economy. When we buy American, we support our future.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's filling up more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we're back with our guest, Alex Newman, investigative reporter and also the senior editor of the New American Magazine, thenewamerican.com. Alex, states, I think, are a key here. So we have the last vestiges of the climate hoax. I mean, it is dying pretty quickly right now with the Trump administration. How can the states put a stake in this vampire once and for all?
Well, I think the state of Florida really showed the way that's done during the COVID scam. Incredible things happened here in Florida that the fake media, if they did mention it all, was only to hyperventilate and talk about how terrible it was. But we put into place laws that not just stopped the federal government's schemes, but actually reversed them in very real and tangible ways. For example, when Joe Biden's OSHA came out with that crazy vaccine mandate that every company with over 100 employees had to force everybody to take a shot, the state of Florida got together. We had a special legislative session, and we passed a law saying that any company that fired their employees because they wouldn't take these shots as per OSHA mandate would be fined 10 times more than OSHA was going to fine them under the federal mandate. So we need creative thinking like that by state governments because, praise the Lord, we've got Donald Trump in office. Praise the Lord, he's stopping some of this stuff. But we've got another election coming up in 2028. And then we've got another election coming up in 2032. So we have got to put into place now legal mechanisms to protect us from this madness in the future. And when it comes to the climate hoax, this would be very easy to do. The state would get together, the state legislature would get together, pass a law saying that no federal regulation, mandate, decree, order, executive order, whatever, demanding the shutting down of a power plant, the rearranging of our energy structures, whatever, is going to be valid in this state. And in fact, we just put it into state statute that federal policy will be disobeyed. This state will use whatever the private market thinks is the best and most cost-effective source of energy, regardless of any of your global warming hoax. So I'm very pleased by what Donald Trump is doing right now on this. And frankly, when we were going into this administration, I was a little bit concerned. Watching him hire Lee Zeldin to run the EPA, I was very, very concerned about that. This was one of the first Republicans in Congress to embrace the really discredited hypothesis that human emissions of CO2 are producing global warming. So when he picked him, I thought, oh, that's not good. Then we got Howard Lutnick, whose company, Cantor Fitzgerald, has been intimately involved in creating these international carbon markets. Uh-oh, that's not good. But what we have seen since Trump took office, literally starting on his first day, is a very deliberate and very strategic effort to destroy all this stuff. But again, all this was done through executive policy, and all of it can be undone just as easily the next time we have a deep state Democrat puppet. So it's essential that state governments now take this little breather that we have and put in place state laws forbidding any kind of federal meddling on any of these issues.
Which brings us to the Federal Reserve. There's been this attempt to audit the Fed, because I think that if it was audited, I think the implication is it would be shut down when people see the size and scope of the corruption and abuse that has gone, off book. But the real tangible way states can push back on that right now, I think, has revolved around honest or sound money and gold and silver. And we're seeing gold and silver taking off right now because people understand that it is a hedge through financial uncertainty. But how can states actually take the reins here and implement these sound and honest money policies to really become a bulwark against the Federal Reserve?
Well, we're watching it happen right now, Matt. It's very, very encouraging. I'm working on a big article about this for the Epic Times right now, and I actually just did a very significant episode of my show Behind the Deep State this week on this same issue. We have at least 24 states now pursuing legislation related to bringing gold back into commerce. Now, each of these bills is a little bit different. Texas, historically, over the last 10 years, has been the furthest along. They actually created a state gold bullion depository. There's legislation right now in the legislature that would turn that into a system to facilitate transactional gold. So if you have gold in the state depository, you would get a little debit card issued by the state where you could walk into any merchant. You could pay with that debit card. The merchant could choose if he wants gold or if he wants Federal Reserve notes. Your account would be debited at the bullion depository, and presto, right? So a lot of states are doing this. Utah just last week passed really historic legislation allowing the state to pay its vendors and its contractors in gold if they so choose. And I've been in communication with Ken Ivory, the lawmaker who's leading the charge there, and they are now working on leading on this issue. They want to be the first state to create this transactional currency system where gold and silver would come back into commerce as per Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution. So these are some of the examples out there, but this is really, really significant because if we got 10, 20, maybe 30 states to seriously put gold back into the center of commerce and the economy, the Federal Reserve would be in big trouble, and the federal government, I think, would be almost forced to take serious action to start bringing back sane money.
And, one of the things that I think is an offshoot of this, especially when you get your currency stable, is that people are going to understand the idea of purchasing power and how much money they've been secretly having confiscated, so which really is a tax scheme under the guise of money printing. How do you think this is going to affect the average American if they actually start to receive more money back into their pocket?
Well, it's going to be very good for the middle class. It's going to be very good for the consumer. And you're right. I mean, if you look at the erosion of our purchasing power, it's simply astounding, right? The Federal Reserve System has stolen probably 98% or more of the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. That just boggles the mind when you put that into perspective by just looking at what you could buy with a dollar back in 1913 versus what you can buy today. So even just by having part of their savings in precious metals, if we can get the IRS off everybody's back, stop treating gold like it's some sort of gold gains, like they're capital gains rather than just holding steady in the face of constant inflation, we really, really could do something incredible here in terms of allowing the middle class to rebuild its savings. And of course, savings are critical to so many other things. So this is, I think, a step in the right direction. We've still got a long way to go. Auditing the Federal Reserve would be great. There's now a bill in both houses of Congress to abolish the Federal Reserve, but with states putting pressure and all of us putting pressure at the federal level, and even Trump has talked about these things, I think we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Matt, to really see good change when it comes to our monetary system.
I completely agree. Now, I want to shift topics right now to Greenland. Now, we all love Sweden, but we're going to talk about Greenland right now. So the second lady and J.D. Vance apparently are traveling there to visit historical sites and watch a dog sled race. But it seems like there's another motive here. Is this real? I mean, does Donald Trump really want to annex Greenland, or is this just putting pressure on their leaders for us to have a military presence bigger than we already have there?
Well, I think it could be either or. I mean, people who know Donald Trump's tactics in negotiations recognize that he often starts by asking for far more than he really intends to get. And he talks about this in The Art of the Deal, right? You make an outrageous request and then negotiate back down to something more reasonable. And so I think it's possible that Trump really would like to annex Greenland. And I think there's a number of reasons why that would probably be good for the United States and it would be good for Greenland. Of course, Denmark is not going to be happy about that. And Denmark is an ally. They're a friendly country. So I would hope we do it. If we do it, I would hope it would be done in a peaceful and fair and legitimate way where everybody was happy. But I think it's also possible that Donald Trump just wants to make sure that the Communist Chinese and the Russians don't come in and not only grab up all of the very, very valuable resources there, but maybe even more importantly, establish some sort of military presence there that could pose a national security threat to the United States. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. I understand that people of Greenland are somewhat divided in terms of whether they'd like to be part of the United States or not. But I think they obviously have to be included in this equation. We don't want to just impose anybody's will on them.
Exactly.
But I think Trump is doing a smart play here.
I do too. Now, I want to talk about that as a segue kind of into on the 250th anniversary of independence here coming up next year, 250th anniversary of Lexington Concord and the shot heard around the world this year, April 19th, Patriots Day. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, gave Trump a letter inviting the United States to return to the British Commonwealth from the King of England. And I know Alex Jones just freaked out about this. I kind of think this is expert trolling on the British part. What say you?
I hope this is trolling because the idea of re-affiliating with the United Kingdom in any kind of formal way would be very troubling to me. I think the British Crown has shown that they are not to be trusted. I do give credit where credit is due. Our heritage, of course, is in the Anglo-Saxon world. The Brits are the ones who gave us the Magna Carta, and the idea of an elected parliament and God-given rights and all these things came out of there. But there's a reason why we declared independence. The UK is now a total mess. King Charles, I think, is actually a disgrace to the British monarchy and the history of that monarchy. So I was a little bit disturbed to see Trump say that it sounds good. I don't think it sounds good at all. I would have ripped up the letter very publicly. But hopefully there's some trolling going on here, and I guess Trump has enough sense to be diplomatic. But I would hope that nobody is seriously considering that.
I would hope so, too. Alex Newman, thank you once again for joining me on Patriot Radio. God bless you and keep up the fight.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, too.
Alex Newman, libertysentinel.org, and also thenewamerican.com, one of the best investigative reporters in the world today for our side. And regarding England, look, my ancestors did not immigrate from Ireland, flee from Ireland, to then have the British try to impose something on them again. I mean, they fled after the potato famine. So I agree with Alex. I hope this is just in jest, but we will keep an eye on it nonetheless. Now, what can you do? Well, one of the things that you can do is educate your local elected officials on the power of the states. The 10th Amendment was very clear that the states retain and the people retain the majority of power. The federal government was supposed to be limited and defined. And in fact, the preamble to the Bill of Rights also says that. So what you can do is educate them that they actually have the power to make these things that Trump is doing permanent. This is Patriot Radio, and thank you once again for joining me today. I'm Matt Shea. May God bless all of you. And he is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. Keep up the fight.